Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to
Hi.
Fuck Shit Up number 2 in 2025. Just in case, because I think we have some people who this is their first meeting they've attended, maybe ever, but certainly this year. I just want to say welcome to everybody. Uh, the idea of Fuck Shit Up is one of my favorite things that I get to do with the United States Bartenders Guild. And that is anytime a task force or a committee is put together and is doing some work before it is stamped final approved, it goes through like a car wash. Also, even if it is stamped and approved, it can be reviewed and brought up for discussion inside of the car wash. And this group is a group of cantankerous feral muskrats that work at the car wash. And so then each time we meet, which generally we have agreed that Tuesdays, 11 to 1 Pacific, seems to work out ish for a lot of people, and the calls are recorded. Not that anybody's ever going to watch the recording, but we picked Tuesdays to meet. Here we are, and we have a different topic. The agreement is I will facilitate, and there is no prep work. So y'all are all joining in. Congratulations and welcome to Fuck Shit Up. Today's kind of general theme is related to the advocacy work that is happening on the national level. And Cole heads up that, I don't remember, is it a task force or is it a committee?
It started as a task force and now it is a committee.
Okay, fantastic. So that makes sense too. So Cole is past president of the USBG and is heading up the now committee related to advocacy. And basically how this is going to go is I'm going to turn it over to Cole. Cole, you get to talk about anything that you want to, bring anything that you want to, present anything you want to, share anything you want to. Be mindful that people are driving or at work or whatever, so I wouldn't get too interactive. And then it's a free for all, so knock yourself out. Those of you that are attending and or working at the car wash, thank you for your time. I am assuming that we can do this relatively orderly, so you can unmute, you can turn your video on, you can talk to Cole directly, you can put shit in the chat. You are welcome to text message me at 202-670-4262 if you're kind of listening and you can't access the chat at the same time. I'll say the number again in just a second. But you can do whatever it is that you need to. If it starts getting a little out of hand and y'all are talking over each other, I will create a stack and I'll call on you. And if nobody's asking anything, I will also call on you in order of the chat to make sure that if you have any thoughts or comments for Cole and or the work that the advocacy committee is doing, those get said within at least the next hour. I know that Jeffrey has to leave at the top of the hour. We have 2 hours reserved, but maybe this is the only topic, so we'll see how long it takes. So with that, if you have any questions generally about Fuck Shit Up, you deliver those to me or direct those to me. But otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to former Madam President T. Cole Newton for
That's
the,
Madam Ex-President.
yeah, former, yep.
Yeah. So thank you, Jess. Appreciate the handoff there. For advocacy, it was one of the bugaboos when I got onto the national board of directors. I've been on the national board since the beginning of 2020. So I think the organization has gone through a lot of changes since then. And I think one of the things that's come out is that when the board of directors sat down in 2022, after having just been doing organizational triage for a couple of years, pretty much, and we dipped our toes into making statements about some things when called upon to do so, but we didn't really have a comprehensive plan for how we were going to approach advocacy as an organization. But at the same time, it really became apparent that advocacy was something that we needed to be doing as an organization because there wasn't another voice for people in the beverage service world specifically. A lot of the national organizations that are doing lobbying are representing the interests of business owners, and we're much more about the employees and people who patronize businesses, but not so much the owner level. There was a void there, and I think especially from the years 2020 to 2022, the degree to which policy decisions, whether they were coming from executives like your mayor or the president or governor, whatever, or they were coming from legislatures, if they were coming from bureaucrats, from people who were just making these decisions that were like public Department of Health, all these organizations were affecting the day-to-day lives of service industry hospitality workers in wildly unpredictable ways, and almost never with consulting actual hospitality employees in the process. So the idea that we should be doing advocacy really cemented itself on the board around that time, and we built it into our strategic plan as an organization. So when well, like one of the core like things that we want to be doing as an organization, according to the board of directors strategic plan that was adopted, was advocacy. To be, and what that looks like is what we spent the last couple of years figuring out. Um, and we're fortunate, I think, especially from the advocacy standpoint, that last year we brought on a new executive director. So Bo Schuff, new ED. I think you've probably all heard from him. He's great. I love him. And he has a lot of background in that sort of political organizing and advocacy space. He was the executive director of the Human Rights Campaign, HRC, which is now kind of a household name in the advocacy world. He ran a successful mayoral campaign in DC. He's done a lot of this kind of work, and he also was a bartender. So he's kind of coming at it from both angles, and he's really been helping us organizationally figure out what doing advocacy actually looks like for us. So last year, he was hired sort of halfway through last year, and we had at the beginning of last year, we established a task force, it's me, a couple other board members, try to figure out what we were going to do about advocacy. And then ultimately, the task force recommended creating the advocacy committee. The advocacy committee is now, I'm the chair of the advocacy committee. The task force disbanded because the committee sort of took over that work. And Bo, all of the committees have a staff liaison, and Bo himself is our staff liaison. And so one of the earliest tasks that we had as an advocacy committee was trying to figure out how and when, I guess those are the two big questions, to engage on a policy issue. So if, or whether or not to endorse a candidate. So if there is a policy that will affect us, is it our place to do that? According to our strategic plan, it is. And is it, how do we make those determinations? Because we can't swing at everything. I mean, we would dilute our appeal, or we wouldn't be able to advocate strongly if we advocated for everything at every opportunity. And not every issue requires the same kind of advocacy. So figuring out one of the most critical things we did as a committee, the thing before even the end of last year, we drafted the policy that I'm going to show you in just a second. If I can figure out the screen sharing piece, I think I got it. We're going to be, we drafted a plan for how to determine whether a call for the organization to engage should be taken up, and if so, what happens next. So that's the context. Before we just on the background, any questions on that? I think I was trying to be as thorough as I could, but there's always something.
It's always good to have background.
Context is important.
Yeah.
Okay. So feel free, I love interruptions. My brain is always pinging all over the place. Drop stuff in chat. Feel free to just yell stuff out, raise your hand, however you want to do it.
Well, let me add just one thing, just because I know how some of the folks are thinking too. I want to use this as an example when in other Fuck Shit Up meetings, we have talked about the importance of looking not at a chapter level or like what's happening in individual chapters, but collectively what's happening on the national level from USBG. So Cole is giving an example of how advocacy is coming from the national strategic plan, informing all the educational efforts and everything else the organization is doing from a higher level than membership or individual chapters. I'm just using it as an example so that people can kind of put their national hats on instead of their individual chapter hats. Back to you, Cole.
Might I chime in and say it's about fucking time?
You and me both, Jeff. I think a lot of people have been asking for this for a long time, which is one of the reasons that we wanted to do it, but we didn't want to do it slapdash. We didn't want to be willy-nilly about it. We wanted to be thoughtful and procedural about it, so that in the inevitable situations where there are people pushing back, we can point to, no, this was done thoughtfully, this was done methodically, this is not just us shooting from the cuff, but we're also in a position where we can respond to almost any request for engagement in one way or another, organizationally. Not everything requires an outward-facing response. But so, okay, with that in place. I'm going to share this window. Share. Okay, so this is the document that we drafted from the advocacy committee last year, and it has three parts, and it's very like the format is standard sort of organizational bylaw muckety muck. So you got three sections. First, where we're going to start, there's your whereas clause. It's your justification for creating a policy. Why are we doing this? Like we're doing it for these following reasons. And then we're going to get down here, the resolution. So whereas we have these conditions, we resolve to do these things or answer these questions, and then the process. Here's how we're going to do it. So starting with the whereas stuff, like why are we doing this? We're doing this because the members of the Bartenders Guild are affected by policies. The effects of those policies have a direct impact on our members' quality of life. We want to determine a clear criteria centered in the values of the membership for the endorsement of a policy proposal or candidate. This is highlighted because there was a note when we were discussing this the last time at the board level. So this has already gone through the advocacy committee, is recommended to the board, and then after that, as we discussed it at the board, and then we decided to kick it out to FSU, then it's going to go back to the advocacy committee for edits from the board and from FSU, and then will be approved by the board. So just sort of, that's the process. So when you see a highlight here, there's three things highlighted. One of the questions that came up at the board is, should we be endorsing candidates at all? I don't know. That's for us to decide. We don't have to endorse anybody just because we've been asked to, though. This leaves that door open, but we don't have to leave that door open. There was a question down here about whether or not we should, whatever Brad is, representing the guild, that individual members aren't allowed to represent the guild, but I feel like that's largely covered somewhere else. And then should we endorse a candidate who, just about candidate endorsement. So it just came up again down here. So circling back to this document, is this we've centered the values of the organization in that, or and it's already been laundered through this body, we have a very robust code of conduct. And I think this was the contribution that Bo, we were like, how do we do this? There's a million ways that we can decide whether or not to engage. And Bo had the bright idea that we should be using the code of conduct that we've already written, that is a very core part of the organizational values. It's on the website. I'll drop a link to it in chat. Hold on a sec. I'll do that now while I'm thinking about it.
The code of conduct is actually one of the first projects that Fuck Shit Up worked on too. Just for those of you that are new this year, it was written, drafted, and reviewed from this group. So, sorry, Cole.
No, that's great. No, that's that was a key feature of why we wanted to use it, is because it was so sort of thoughtfully crafted and laundered through this group, and like all the different levels of the organization saw this and were like, this is the thing. So a lot of the language you're going to see below is actually taken directly from the code of conduct, which is outward facing on our website. It's not internal. Any non-members can see this on our website and understand the values of the organization. So we've got a code of conduct, and it reflects the mission and the values of the organization. And we've done that part of the work. We've determined our organizational values. The USBG is required to agree and comply with the code of conduct events. We should only support policies or proposals that align with the code of conduct, and we would only endorse a candidate who, through their words or actions, upholds the values laid forth in the code of conduct, which you can review the whole thing. I dropped the link for that purpose. But like I said, a lot of that specific language is here. So the following criteria are how we would like to determine whether or not to officially support a policy, proposal, initiative, or candidate, which we felt were like four buckets that covered pretty much everything. Candidate is sort of in its own bucket. Everything like policy, somebody's gonna be voting on that. A proposal, somebody's gonna deciding whether or not to put this thing out. Initiative, sort of like a ballot initiative that might not come from a legislature, but it's a policy that will be put into place if that passes. Where the candidate is sort of in separate buckets. So some of these things are referred to like most of the first three, policy, proposal, or initiative, and some of them are more specific to whether or not we decide to endorse candidates. So result of the USBG adopt the follow. Oh, well, actually, sorry, I forgot. This one was actually about whether or not we should have any language about being nonpartisan. So just flagging that as something that's come up for discussion. Without getting too deeply into it, I think we live in an era where trying to be nonpartisan could completely hamper our ability to do advocacy. So I would not want to be an explicitly nonpartisan, because when one party is behaving extremely badly, it's being nonpartisan is not a neutral stance. Anyway, that's more
Cole,
philosophical.
hold
Go
on
ahead,
one second. Paula is
please.
unmuted. So Paula, I didn't know if you had a question or a comment.
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, okay, great. I'll mute you just in case. Go ahead, Cole.
Great. So
Oh,
first
wait,
thing.
sorry. Now Augustina has unmuted. Did you have a comment or a question?
I do have a comment about the
Great.
nonpartisan stuff.
Mhm.
So I am personally a very partisan person. So I'm just going to put that out there. I think that the benefit of stating that we are nonpartisan is the ability for us to negotiate and exist in a space where we are not aligned with one thing or another. That isn't to say that we should be going out and supporting, hate crimes, but also it gives us agility when we are doing things like lobbying days and advocacy work on the field level and at the national level, if we ever go to DC or anything like that. Stating that we are nonpartisan is going to open more doors for us. So I just want to put that out there as a consideration.
I think there's a lot of value in being an overtly nonpartisan organization, but I think once we wade into advocacy one way or another, I think a lot of things that I would consider to be nonpartisan issues, like not deporting a child with cancer who is an American citizen, I don't think that's a partisan question, but also other people do. So I think we will be labeled as partisan for taking stances on things one way or another. But if we are explicitly a nonpartisan organization and we can point to this and say we're not doing it for partisan reasons, we're doing it for organizational values reasons, right? So I think there is something to be said for the optics of being explicitly nonpartisan, even as we are inherently taking partisan stances by dipping into advocacy at all. But yes, I think.
No, I
so,
mean,
yeah.
I agree with you, but in my mind, human rights is not a partisan issue. So, but
I wish
know
that were always the case, but I think in our modern world it is.
I think that things have been politicized that shouldn't be politicized. But,
Also
I just want to throw that out there and thank you and please continue. And I will put myself back on mute.
This is, what, I thank you for chiming in. This is exactly why we are doing this. We want to get those kind of visceral reactions to things. And, I will take that back to the board when we discuss this next, or back to advocacy committee on Friday when we discuss it next, and then to the board. Anyway, so does the result, the meat of this is we will adopt the following criteria to determine official support for a policy proposal, initiative, or candidate. Do they respect the dignity and rights of others, regardless of social or occupational or identities? That is taken, and the list is taken directly from our code of conduct. Does the candidate, because this would be specific to a candidate, refrain from engaging in misrepresentation, unethical practices, discrimination, hateful speech, etc., publicly disparaging or harassing others? There are plenty of candidates these days for whom this would automatically be written off. But if they are doing that, and it would be a violation for the code of conduct if a member did it, we should not endorse that candidate. Does the policy proposal or initiative increase health and safety, prevent harassment, discrimination, intimidation, and retaliation in hospitality spaces? Then it is relevant, germane to the interests of our membership. We are welcome to weigh in. And I think and this can be a really plastic clause here. So something like, does this prevent harassment? My understanding is that areas where there's no tip exemption for minimum wage have lower rates of workplace harassment in hospitality. So I'm not taking a stance on that position, on that policy. I'm happy to in private. But like, that's the kind of thing, like, you can use those sort of statistics to determine whether or not something that may seem sort of tangential is in fact related to the conditions that people work in hospitality. Does the policy proposal, initiative, or individual support, promote, and engage in contemporary best practices? This was something that I was I thought was a little vague. So I kind of pushed back. Bo was in favor of this one, and we left it in for this process. And his articulation is that a lot of what we don't catch here, like what's a current best practice in the beverage industry, is trying not to overserve people, or taking a course, or doing staff trainings in sexual violence prevention. I think those are certainly contemporary best practices in the beverage industry. And I think some of that would prevent harassment or increase health and safety. But it might be hard to figure out how. And I think best practices sort of gets to what have we not thought of that people should really be doing kind of catch all. Does the engagement, is there a conflict of interest? Those are the conflict. Like, is there somebody who stands to personally gain if we adopt a policy? Because we don't want that to be part of the criteria. And then the last part of this plan is the proposed procedure, which is board of directors. The committee shall be the entity. So it's good. Everything comes to the advocacy committee first. We were built for this purpose, among others, but we were built for this. So when somebody asks the organization to take a stance on any of the four buckets of stances that you can take, this is what we will do as the committee. And then what happens next? So it goes to anything that's presented to a staff member or a member of the board of directors goes to the advocacy committee automatically. We cannot ignore a request for advocacy, no matter how spurious, no matter how much that request just obviously conflicts with our organizational values. Does not matter. If a request comes in and a member of the board of directors or a member of the staff gets their eyes on it, then we are obligated to respond. So I guess it has to be posed to them. So but that does count. If somebody says hey, so if somebody makes a comment, I can actually articulate, because we took this plan for a spin when we were talking about a response to recent changes in immigration policy and how we should respond as an organization. So after we talked through drafting the plan, we tried it out once because there was a request that came in, and I'll talk about how it came in too as part of that. So all matters referred to the everything that gets referred to the organization, if it gets sent to a board member or to a staff member, will be compiled and sent to the advocacy committee. Everything referred to the advocacy committee, nothing stays there. We are not allowed to just bottle things up in committee and decide that nothing needs to be done. We can suggest that nothing be done, but we cannot take that action as a committee. Everything that the advocacy committee gets goes to the board of directors with a recommendation. And that recommendation will be one of three things, or possibly 2 out of 3. But first one, nah. This isn't for us. This isn't about us. There's not a reason. It's too risky. There are plenty of reasons why it might not be a good idea for us to engage on the specific request. We'll probably reply to the person who made the request, and it'll more or less end there, if the board agrees with that recommendation. Second is to say something, adopt a public position. The board has decided, or the advocacy recommends, that we take a stance on this, and maybe we're putting out a press release, or maybe we're doing it in putting it out on our socials and sending it out in our emails, whatever we're doing. That is ultimately also a staff decision, how to adopt a public position. And it's also part of what we're still sort of crafting in our mission in advocacy is what adopting a public position will look like from issue to issue, and how to make that determination. Separate question. And then the third one is, we don't know what to do. Taking a public position may not be helpful, but we need to do something. And so that we say, hey, staff, what should we do here? Please come up with a plan to engage. And so the staff, because they have a lot of the organizational connections, Bo specifically, because he's been in this world for a long time, he can reach out to other organizations, be they lobbies or groups of importers, or concerned business people, whatever other organizations that are doing similar work, and see what they're doing. You can join coalitions with other organizations, which we have done, and there's a lot of so what should we do here? So if we don't know whether or not we should take a public position, then that could be part of what the staff recommends. So we need to take action, we don't know what to do, staff, come back to us with a plan. And I think if there's a piece missing here for me, because this is the last piece of it, is we're not going to contradict the interests of a local board. That if we are called to, if the national organization is called to weigh in on a state or local matter, policy, candidate, any of them, we will not do so without the full support of the local chapter. And I thought about it, like, okay, but what if the local chapter is wrong? And he was like, it's just not good for an organization to start doing that kind of thing. Like, you can't, nothing about us without us, as they say. So we will not we will not say, like, if the Chicago chapter says don't endorse this candidate, we will not endorse that candidate, even if we think they're the bee's knees. I think, okay, so that's the document in its entirety. And the thing that I think is missing is what happens after this. Like, because if we just say the staff should come up with a plan, and then then that's it. And I know we need a reporting requirement. We know, like, when is that plan due? When are we going to see that plan? What is it? Should we have criteria for what that plan should constitute? I think Moyer's like, we just need regular updates or something like that. But a reporting requirement, I think, would add some teeth here. I don't think that's a problem right now, because Bo is very much like on board with making this work. But we, in the future, might have staff that doesn't want us to be doing this, and ultimately it's not up to them. So if we don't want to lose this at all the levels, right? We don't want to lose any requests, so all requests come to the committee. We don't want it to get bottled in committee, so every request that the committee sees then goes to the board. And I want the piece that here is this missing is that if it goes from the board to the staff, it needs to come out of there too, right? There's no opportunity for this to just, whatever the issue is, to just get bundled up and tucked under the rug somewhere. Not an opportunity. And I think that's missing from this plan as it currently is. I voiced that already, so I'm planning on making that request in the advocacy committee meeting this Friday. There we go. Those are all the words. All right. So that's the document. It is relatively brief. It is informed by our organizational values. It has a plan. So I think we'll probably wind up going back. Let's see, stop sharing. How do I do this? Stop share. There it is. Okay. Cool. How's everyone doing? How you feeling?
Great. Mo just joined us. So Mo, welcome. Cole just finished kind of going over a draft of the advocacy committee paperwork. So welcome. And hold on, because I'm willing to bet Alina unmuted. So I'm guessing Alina probably has some questions. And from those questions, Cole will answer them. And then that will probably catch you up, Mo. And then people just unmute if you have a question or a comment for Cole. I'll call on you. And if no one else unmutes, I'm going to start at the bottom. Stephanie, you're listed at the bottom on my Zoom. And we'll start there and see if you have any thoughts or comments. So, and Augustina in the chat said, is anybody having weird sound issues? I can barely hear. And I'm not experiencing any sound issues, but that doesn't mean nobody else is. Mo can hear. Cole can hear. Great. Alina, you are unmuted. Did you have any thoughts or comments or questions?
Yeah, I think this is a good start. I agree with you. I think we need to define what that follow through means as far as action plans. And I think that something is missing for me is this is obviously going to be used a lot on local levels for local issues, local politics. Are we fully empowering? Are we
Mo, I'm
fully?
going to mute you.
Sorry.
I muted Mo because there was some background noise. Go ahead, Alina.
Yeah. So you were saying that this is going to be used a lot locally.
Follow the same thing. Do chapters have to feed their initiatives up through national and get approval? Are chapters empowered to make their own local political decisions? How does that function within our organization as a chapter policy?
I think I want to come at that question from two positions. One, the chapters are already doing this. Some with great success. Some have very much struggled to do it, but a lot of them have already dipped their toes in it. We saw a lot of effective advocacy out of the North Carolina chapters for like drinks to go during COVID. In New Orleans, when I was on the board of directors locally here, we helped with noise ordinances. We helped rewrite the noise ordinances. We've helped with like zoning stuff, manager qualifications, like things like that. So we've done a lot of this at a local chapter level, and a lot of the energy and the idea of what can be done has been informed by the work that's already being done at the chapter level. Those are just two of myriad examples. So I want to respect the work that's coming out of the chapters. And also, I don't think we would stop that. I don't think we could stop that if we wanted to, and I certainly don't want to. I think a lot of the work that the chapters are doing
facilitate more of that, and I want to make it easier for chapters that don't have the tools.
Absolutely. So I think I would, if I were, so I will say that one of the projects of the advocacy committee, now that this is done, we've got other stuff going on, we're monitoring requests as they come in, and one of our big projects that is not yet done is figuring out how to empower chapters with the tools to advocate at the local and state level and at the neighborhood level. So much of the advocacy work that needs to be done that affects bartenders' day-to-day lives is affected by it's zoning boards, it's quality of life issues, it's police response time, or whether or not that's something you want. Does your neighborhood have a neighborhood security district? If so, that's probably controlled not even by, like, that's below, you're getting down below city council to like neighborhood organizations, which technically don't have power, but if you've lived in one that did, you know it can. So like we want to be able to get our members into those spaces. The USBG at every level, from the neighborhood to the international sphere. Eventually there'll be bartenders in space, but not yet. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But for all of the world of bartenders, we want the USBG and the IBA to a certain extent to be consulted, right? We want, eventually, the goal of advocacy for an organization, like first, we got to be getting ourselves into those rooms, right? We got to be getting we got to go meet your congressperson. You got to go, meet your mayor, get in front of your city council person, all that stuff. And also, we want them to start coming to us. We want to be the organization where it's like, if a city council person is working on changing the noise ordinance, they're like, I better see if there's a USBG chapter in this city, and if so, get them on board. We want, so like but getting to that point, I think again, it happens at all levels. Once you talk to a city council person as a member of the USBG, and then they hear about us again when they're a congressperson, you're already in the door. So I think that you build that foundation at the chapter level. And the project that I've been alluding to and keep talking around is sort of like what we're envisioning right now is a toolkit, an idea like, here's what works, here's how you get in the room. Because we don't want to tell chapters what to do or how to advocate, although I would recommend that they follow the same general guidelines, like have the board of directors come up with take one of these paths, but it could be a chapter board of directors too. So I would hope that chapters come up with a criteria that more or less mirrors this one, because it's been very thoughtfully crafted. We want to make sure that they have the skills, the tools, that they know how to get out in front of the people that are going to be deciding, how late a bar can stay open, what it's allowed to serve, whether or not it's required to serve food too. I mean, it's tons of things that it like as a
people that work at it.
What's that?
How much it pays people that work at it.
How much people get paid, all of these things, whether or not they are required to have rubber mats for ergonomic, there's so many tiny things and huge things that are like come out of these things, and we want to be consulted. And so I think the toolkit is a piece of that.
So much stuff is I think
so much is local.
That within like writing these policies, presenting them new, that this energy is represented in what we're presenting to our chapters, to make them know that they're fully supported in doing local work, and that we're not going to put roadblocks to them doing local work. We're in fact putting up more resources to help. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We don't want to block local advocacy. We want to facilitate local advocacy, as long as it aligns with the mission and values of the organization. All right. Cool. any other
Yeah.
thoughts before we? Oh yeah, you're just gonna do the rundown. Do the rundown.
Right. Sorry. That's what I'm doing. Augustina, you are unmuted, and then if no one else unmutes after Cole and Augustina, then I'm going to start at the bottom of the list, which means Stephanie, you're up. Go ahead, Augustina.
I just had a question about local boards being empowered and how that coincides with the national advocacy objective, because there may be some local boards that are advocating for things that are in conflict with what the National Advocacy Committee has set forth to do. And how do we have plans to deal with that, if any, as the local chapters are a direct reflection of the USBG as a whole?
I think the idea that any advocacy that we engage in be values driven, I think, is where we have to land with that. And I think ultimately, like, they're allowed to disagree, right? We don't need ideological purity at the chapter level. And I think if we start enforcing that, if we start having this litmus test for ideology, it becomes a slippery slope. And I don't think that, while I think that right now the preponderance of the National Board of Directors is pretty liberal on a lot of issues, I don't think that's always going to be the case. And it certainly hasn't always been the case in the past. So I think it's important that individual chapters have some measure of autonomy, because we want them to be able to stand up to the national organization if it becomes required to do so. But they need to be doing it from a place of organizational values. So I think that we want to make sure that they know they can, that we think they should, and we want to hold space for them to disagree with us. And so we're never going to go against what a chapter says in an advocacy space. We'll back them up if they ask us to. We're not going to contradict them. And as long as what they are advocating for, they can do it through a lens of organizational values, then we're going to be hands off about it. But if another chapter says, hey, we would like the national organization to take a stance on this, and runs it up through the process, we will have to take a stance on that, or at least consider taking a stance on it. So we might wind up making a statement that is contradictory to the statement of a local board. And this is all hypothetical, again, because none of this has really been tested in practice, but I'm just kind of imagining how that might go. Then yeah, I could see us putting out a statement that contradicts the statement of the local board, but we do not, like, I don't want to undermine the right that board would have to disagree with the national board.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of disagreement necessarily. I think it's a matter of continuity. So the local boards have a independence. They're all independent 501c6s, is my understanding. But
that's true for now. Yes, all of the registered chapters are currently 501c6s in their own right, but not all the affiliated communities.
But they are all under the national USBG level. So in my mind, I'm imagining, say we have a chapter in Idaho that is, endorsing a candidate that is antithetical to USBG code of conduct values. And they, as the local board, are all, I mean, this is all hypothetical. This is probably never going to happen. But this
I think
is
over
why
a long enough period of time, it easily could.
This is like the fuck shit up committee. So let's live in this hypothetical world where we have a chapter board that is gung-ho, anti-trans, let's go Brandon, orange guy, affiliated people, and they want to endorse a candidate that is antithetical to USBG values and code of conduct stated guidelines. Like, at that point, do we as a national chapter come in and say, no, you can't do that? That candidate is against our values. That goes against what our values are as an organization. Or
I think that I don't know actually what we would be required. Yeah, I don't think we've gotten that granular in our conversation. So I will take that question to Bodo for sure. I need to be taking I'm taking notes in that document, but there's also some stuff that I want to make sure I'm capturing that's not part of this right now.
Yeah. I think
So yeah,
ultimately, Cole, the thing that I think would be a discussion piece, right, is that to Christina's idea of the Idaho chapter, right, is that if they can take that stance from a USBG values place, if they
Mhm.
can connect those two things, then the national board has to figure out how to either make that a no or figure out how to support it, right? But Augustina, to Cole's point, I think the Idaho chapter would be burdened by figuring out how to do that through the USBG values. So the values are subjective and up for interpretation. It's also important to remember that the USBG as a whole has members with all different kinds of political ideology. So when associations really determine that their association values or their code of conduct is going to be elevated to the level that Cole and the advocacy committee are talking about, you may also lose members. You may also lose entire chapters, but you would be doing that based on the values and the standards of the organization. That all of that is possible and part of this conversation, which hypothetically you can have, and even if you reach a decision from a hypothetical conversation until it's actually happening, that's the test. That's what I would say, Cole.
Yeah, I think, but I think it's worth considering if a local chapter or affiliated community, whatever, comes out with a statement or endorses a candidate that is like that we feel like as engaging in harassment, or is enriching themselves in a way that appears to be a conflict of interest. These are some fairly common complaints. Um, that like what happens if they use the language of our value statement in a way that we feel misrepresents the truth, perhaps. What do we do? How do we say this? They're not with us, this is not what do we do? I don't know. So what's that process look like? If we feel compelled to contradict a local chapter, because not because we disagree with them as a matter of policy, but we disagree with the rationale that they're using, then yeah, I think that's a big question.
What if we
Um,
required local chapters to put a disclaimer on statements like that said something to the effect of, our local chapter views do not necessarily reflect the views of the larger USBG community?
yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. Or that like yeah, I think there's probably degrees of that, right? So it's like if it's something that that the chapter endorses and that we're staying out of, then maybe the required statement is, does this or like the USBG Phoenix chapter endorses this policy, right? That if they're specific that it's not a USBG endorsement, it's a chapter endorsement. Or if they are doing it in contradiction to the national policy or whatever, if we've endorsed something and they're endorsing the opposite thing, then they might have to say that too. So like at one level it's like, hey, we're not on board with this, but we're not on board with this. Then it's like, okay, the chapter endorsement. Or if it's the chapter contradicting the national organization, then they have to say that too. Perhaps I think I could.
But also, can the chapters contradict the national organization? Like, I think that's a really sticky, slippery slope. If we allow, the chapters should be able to come to the national organization with concerns and with disagreements and different opinions and all of those things. But should local chapters be able to completely contradict a national USBG policy? I think that's a really big question.
When also from my time on the New Orleans board, there was a statement made about an investigation and an article that came out about it. I don't need to go into the details, but I thought that the statement that came from the national organization was poorly worded. Poorly worded does not describe it. It was bad enough, and so I think woefully misguided, that I felt compelled at the chapter level to put out a statement that was like, they're not speaking for us. And I got a lot of, I think that It's part of what propelled me up to international leadership. I was like, there need to be people up there who like are thinking about what they're saying and the consequences of it, and the effects that it's going to have on people who read the. So like we can't just be thinking about like covering our asses legally. We've got to be thinking about what this means, And so, but I think
I completely
had
agree.
I not, thank you. But like I think that's what I want to get. Like we want to make sure the national leadership isn't always going to be right. I think is the important piece of this. And we want the chapters, I think, to know that just because we say it's okay doesn't mean it's okay. This is up to them too at a certain point. And maybe they have to say that we disagree with them. The national board disagrees with the chapter. But I think that they should, I personally think that they should have that wherewithal.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I think that, they should, any independent organization should be able to come out, or chapters should be able to come out and be like, no. But at the same time, I'm just thinking from a meta level and a public relations level, if the national board is saying one thing and you've got 3 local chapters that are saying another, and I mean, I can just, and this is all in the hypothetical, right? Like it's all in this imaginary world that I have imagined in my head. But how do we deal with the shitstorm of fallout? Like, what if the contradiction of the local chapters from the national chapters is enough to create media attention or, questions or things like that? Like, we have to have some mechanism where there is a divide and it's stated and it's very, very public, I think, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in an instance where a chapter is going against the stated stance of the national organization that has already been laundered through this process, and I think they should be. I don't think it's crazy to think that they should be asked to divulge that in their local advocacy. Yeah.
So anyway.
Cool. Because of time, and I know Jeff has to leave at the top of the hour. Stephanie, is it okay if I call on Jeff first and then you, Stephanie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So Jeffrey, you get to weigh in, thoughts, comments before you got to go.
Yeah, boy, it's kind of difficult to like organize these things when I could just talk to Cole face to face.
That is also allowed, but I want to make sure that you have space before you got to go.
Yeah. If you think of something in 2 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks, shoot me a text.
I'm gonna text you this week for next week. Fair?
Sounds good.
Cool in the game.
Great. Okay, Stephanie, you are up, and then Paula, you're on deck. Stephanie, I think you have to unmute. It worked just a second ago because you said something. So while Stephanie is working on unmuting, it'll be Paula, and then I'll go to David or David. I don't know which one logged in. Stephanie, what's happening?
Well, Paula was up at this point.
I know. Well, we're waiting on Stephanie to unmute, but it worked, and then now for some reason it's not working. I'll go to Paula while Stephanie's figuring out. Paula, you're up next, and then David or David.
Hi. Yeah, I totally, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm staying off camera. I totally agree on the advocacy and I guess policy and protocol. As I know, when I've talked to people in other chapters, not just ours, there are some people where there has been harassment and things like that. And I think that's just something to be aware of in general. And maybe at meetings or just bring up like, this is our policy, these are our protocols, just across the board from anybody's meetings. I don't know how other board, I was on the board for a couple of years previously. How people feel about that or what they think, just say, this is a safe space type of thing. And I think that something like that should be brought up.
That making sure that people know that they can disagree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. because I mean, people know about our chapter issues. I know there's other chapters that have issues, and you know, we're trying to build up membership again. And I just think it's something that, you know, people need to realize we're moving forward. And if there are any issues, please, it doesn't have to be obviously in front of everybody, but just, you don't need to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think there's work. A lot of that work happens informally. You know, at least the sort of sidebar conversations that you have on the fringe of these things, like, hey, we respect you, we value your contributions to the organization, and also we understand that you disagree on this issue. And those, you can have those kind of conversations respectfully. But I also think that the staff will likely, if we make a public statement, especially, you know, crafting it in such a way that we're trying not to offend the people that disagree with the stance that we're taking as we take it, is something that we should definitely consider.
Right. I mean, this wouldn't be a point of like agree or disagree, just in my opinion. It's that, you know, you how do I say it?
Or respecting each other as we do it.
Respect, exactly. Somebody says back off, stay out of my space, don't talk to me, I don't want to whatever. Respect that. This is not what this is about.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool.
Thank you.
Is it David or David? Which one of you logged in?
Hola, it's David.
Oh, it is David. Hi.
Hi.
Any thoughts or comments or questions? Damien, you're up next.
No questions, but I can see the blurred line there in terms of, you know, making things either a political or human rights issue. I know that it's gonna be a thin line to walk, but you know, when again, like having those sidebar conversations and knowing where the USBG thinks when it comes to those issues is going to be very important and integral to have, and when the time is available. Right, but yeah, that's all I got for now.
Cool.
Oops. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
Damien, I have asked you to unmute just in case you have any thoughts or comments or questions. Zoom being Zoom. I'm going to go with maybe they don't have any, and that's why they're not unmuting. I can't tell what's happening. Stephanie, did you figure out the muting situation? Nope. All right, and then Mo, I know you were able to join a little bit later after the initial presentation, but I've asked you to unmute on the off chance you have any thoughts or comments, kind of pulling the things together from what you've been able to glean while you've been here.
Not at the moment. I am just listening to everybody else's feedback and trying to take it all in. I'm kind of in agreement with everybody, like people should govern themselves accordingly when it comes to managing their own chapter. However, there are rules and we want to make sure that those rules are clear. And that's where I stand today.
All right.
Super dupes. All right. Other than asking people to unmute, I can't make people unmute, but if you have any other thoughts or comments, we are almost at the top of the hour. This is the time. This is the free for all. Go get Cole.
I can walk through because here's how this works in action, right? So somebody posted a couple of months ago, immigration policy was starting to be enforced differently than it had been. And a lot of people were posting about it on social media. And somebody in one of the comments on one of the posts said, where is the USBG on this? Or it wasn't about us specifically, but it was like, where are other organizations? Does the USBG have a stance on this immigration crackdown? We would like them to engage. And so that was enough. Just having somebody on our board of directors saw that comment directed to the USBG on a social media post was enough to initiate this process. So we discussed it as an advocacy committee, and there was not unanimous agreement between whether or not we should adopt a public position or take action. And so I think what we recommended, because we couldn't really come to an agreement, we recommended that we kick it to staff to come up with a plan, because, you know, like, let's see the plan first before we decide if that's what we should do. And staff is in better position to do that. So that was what we agreed to do as an organization. It was like, hey, we need a plan for how we as an organization are going to take action on the issues of immigration today. So that was what the board ended up agreeing to do, was to direct the staff to develop a plan. At our next board meeting, the staff came back with an engagement plan, which, let me see, I think I've got it here. This is the immigration. Yeah, I'll share my screen again. So they came back with an engagement plan, and it did not involve making a public statement. And again, this was a point of much discussion among the board of directors, whether or not we wanted to be outwardly vocal about this, or if we just wanted to do something. What can we do as an organization? And I think what we ended up doing, and I'll scroll down. So it was like, this is, you know, it was a pretty robust document that they came back with. And then this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna invite a lawyer to talk to the USBG about the intersection between nonprofit governments and advocacy, because a lot of nonprofits are being attacked right now, especially ones that are seen as working against the interests of the American people in the interpretation of the current administration. Those organizations, especially ones that sometimes would have, you know, the federal government as a client, put themselves at great risk by advocacy. So we just had a discussion about that, so that we get the board up to speed on what the risks of advocacy are in this current environment. And they come with rewards too. Honestly, I think that if we were attacked by President Trump, that could be a real PR windfall for the organization if handled correctly. It's risks, but it also has an opportunity for reward. So that was discussed too. Then we join the American Business Immigration Council, that has a very it's a bipartisan coalition of immigration reform advocates, but it's not an anti-immigration organization by any means. It's a pro-immigration organization, but it's fairly bipartisan. And then the thing that I think was probably got most of the board on board with this plan is that we increased our engagement with the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. We got cards. We sent out templates to cards to chapters that wanted them, and then these templates for cards you can hand out to people that may be at risk in their communities from deportation or detainment because of their perceived or actual immigration status. And I think this probably, I don't know if this specific action of ours was more impactful, but in its totality, informing people of their rights has proven to be a much more effective deterrent than taking a public stance. So, like, we could have taken a public stance on this, might have had some risks, might have had some rewards. We don't know. Probably would not have changed any policy. But what we can do, because we know we can't change the policy, maybe this is not where we weigh in publicly, but we help individual people navigate the policy as our active advocacy. It's taking a direct action, informing a vulnerable population of their rights. And so we took that action as an organization about facilitating our chapters to help members of their community know their rights. And then they added this, because this is ongoing, we do not expect this to be the totality of the action that we take on this issue. So that is the result of this process in action. As the one time we were able to take it out for a spin and see how it performed in real life conditions.
Alina, you're unmuted. Did you have thoughts or comments?
I think it was just a little like pull back to as far as giving chapters autonomy, is that that's still within the limits of our code of conduct. Like, if a chapter is out there vocally saying something horrible that goes against our code of conduct, we can absolutely still do something about that.
Yeah, any member that violates the code of conduct, and the chapter leadership will be constituted of members, and have their membership suspended for violating the code of conduct. Like, there's a lot we can do if people violate the code of conduct that's just organizational process. So if somebody comes out and is like, it is important to us to say we should take away the right to vote from any marginalized group, then we could kick those people out of the organization if we wanted to, because they would be, in so doing, would be violating the code of conduct. So I think that document that we spent a lot of time on, it explicitly has processes for what happens if you do violate it. And losing your membership temporarily or permanently is explicitly listed. So I think that could be a good way to keep, not that we're trying to keep them in line, but if there's something so egregious that we can't abide it, then the people who engaged in that advocacy will also have violated the code of conduct in doing so.
Can I ask something?
I'll go.
Please.
Yeah. If somebody violates the code of conduct, but it's not at a meeting or at an event, does that still count or no?
Let me double check the code of conduct here. I'll pull that up. So we got, okay, member code of conduct. Because we're not real, the bartender have conducted honesty, integrity, fairness, respect the dignity, whether in person or online, refrain from engaging in misrepresentation, unethical practices, discrimination, malicious or hateful speech, publicly disparaging or harassing fellow members. That is not specific to USBG events. So if you are a USBG member doing those things in a public space, it can be held against you. So that, yeah, that's not, here, I dropped a link earlier, but just I'll try to do this screen share thing for that.
It
Just
can't be held
get
against
it
you,
up on screen.
It
What's
cannot
that?
be held against.
No, it
Generally,
can't.
generally speaking, the staff of an association, it's very challenging. Any association, not just USBG, but it's very challenging for staff to be able to enforce just random public behavior. So that public behavior has to be associated somehow with USBG. And Cole, I could be totally off, but I believe that this is still an accurate interpretation of the code of conduct. So if I'm just an asshole at a party, but I'm not wearing a USBG shirt, it's not associated with a vendor or supplier or an event from USBG, it's not illegal to be an asshole. It is illegal to do a lot of things, but that would be held through the legal system. But if it's at a USBG sanctioned event, associated event, online or in person, but it's under the USBG thing, their membership, their code of conduct can be held to expectations of the code of conduct because of the association.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, it's certainly much easier for us to police that kind of thing in USBG spaces. And I will say that when we are engaging in a USBG activity, the people at that activity should also be following the code of conduct. So if there are a member outside of a USBG space, like an official meeting or USBG event, the way I'm reading the code of conduct, this is based on like the words that are on my screen right now. It does not say that it did not say that they have to be at a USBG event to be held to these standards. But it does say that people who are at USBG events, whether or not they are members, have to abide by these standards. So there is, we can control our own spaces, and that is very easy for us to do for members, and not easy for us to do, but easy for us to take action in response to something that does go wrong, because we're going to be like,
right, I get it.
The idea of we can't prevent harassment, but we can do something about it when it happens, and we can create conditions in which it's less likely, which is why we have these values explicit.
Right. So basically, if let's say something were to happen and like the legal system says that was not a problem, right? Maybe they have really good lawyers. Who knows? The legal system says it's not a problem. USBG can still say, well, it's a problem to us because of the code of conduct, right? That's usually the loop. Alina, you're still unmuted, and Paula, you are as well. And then I don't know if Damien's back, and then Stephanie, I don't know if you were able to figure out the muting situation or type in the chat. Alina, did you want to say something?
No, I think I just forgot to mute myself again.
Oh, that's totally allowed. I'm just looking for signals. I think Damien has stepped away, and Stephanie still hasn't been able to, or I can't figure out what's going on with the muting thing with Stephanie. Other general thoughts. Bob sent me a text message, but it's kind of a subject change. So I want to be able to read this text message, but I don't want it to be like too weird of a transition if somebody had something they wanted to say. But Cole, just so you know, Bob is telling you to do something. So about the slate. So FYI, that's coming.
Did Bob text me too, or did he just text you to tell me to do it?
I think he just texted me to tell you to do it and then is taking a nap.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'm not seeing any unmutings for Cole. So, okay. Bob, who was here, who had to leave a little early, has texted, sorry I had to drop off. Have Cole explain how the board is elected by slate. The slate is determined by the nominating committee, which can slant the members on the board to a certain criteria, and that is all you're allowed to vote for. Individuals who didn't make the committee's criteria cannot run. I think if the board makes these decisions, then they should be open to move to more viewpoints on the board. That is all. Time for a nap.
That is a bit of a subject change indeed.
Uh-huh.
The
Welcome to fuck shit up, though.
hey. Yeah, I think that we've the nomination committee has adopted a practice of moving forward a slate of candidates for election to the National Board of Directors. I will say that Bobby was not on the slate a year or two ago and wanted to be. And I think there's something, it's tricky because it's one of those things that on its surface appears to be somewhat undemocratic. Like, hey, it used to be that every qualified candidate, this is not relevant currently. So it used to be that any qualified candidate was advanced into the election, and every incumbent won every time. Every time a standing board member ran for re-election, they automatically won. And when there was an open slot, when somebody wasn't running for a second term, then it was almost exclusively won by whoever just had the most name recognition. The amount of people voting was only about 10% of our membership, and when our membership dropped down, there are times when the people are being elected by a tiny fraction of a tiny group, and that does not make for a democratic process. So the nominating committee decided that they were going to advance a slate of candidates instead, 3 candidates for the 3 available positions. Some of them would be existing board members, but usually not all of them. So we would always be getting some new blood. They would be more thoughtful about trying to represent diverse viewpoints or diverse backgrounds, diverse skill sets. There's a lot of ways that, you talk about diversity and people like visual markers of diversity, but there's a lot of different types of diversity that the nominating committee can consider when putting together a thoughtful slate of candidates. So I think we've got a board now that, while Bobby had his own experience of the process and was left pretty discouraged by it, and is still a very engaged member in our community, and I'm grateful for that. And he's done a lot of work for the organization, and I'm grateful for that. I think he was a little burnt that it wasn't done the same way it had been done before, and he did not see the result that he got before as a result of that. But I think that Bobby doesn't necessarily, I don't know. I think I don't want to overstep too much. So I think while it's a less little d democratic process, I think it results in more democratic representation within the organization. So I think my fundamental point of disagreement with Bobby is that I think he feels to a certain extent that he was run out of town for being more conservative, and I think we actually valued that perspective on the board. I certainly did. I disagreed with Bobby about a lot of issues, not everything. We aligned on a lot of stuff too, but we disagreed about a lot. But I liked having him there because I liked being able to hear those points of view. So what he thinks, I think, to a certain extent, which is what he was alluding to in his question, is that he was shown the door because of ideological differences. And I think fundamentally, I think that's just not why we decided, why not me, I'm not on the nominating committee, why the nominating committee decided that he would not going to be a part of slate that year was not because of ideological reasons.
Can I add something just for fun?
Please.
Because I worked with the nominating committee directly as they were kind of making this shift, and it's very common within associations as well. This is not specific to USBG, that the voter turnout is so low that name recognition and popularity is often the kind of main thing you need in order to win any kind of position. I would say that this is also common on a chapter level as well as on a national level of basically every association I work with as a client. And so when slates are developed, there are two purposes that the nomination committees typically really look at who to put onto a slate. One of them is the strategic plan and the values of the actual association. So then there's a, for lack of better words, like an assessment of existing people and finding out what skills are missing that are needed in order to achieve the strategic plan and the code of conduct. Often when we talk about code of conduct, we immediately think of people who are fucking up, but the code of conduct is also about doing things forward. So even if we take advocacy as a whole, when advocacy was a great idea, but it didn't have a lot of people there with a lot of skills of knowing how to position the association to actually do advocacy on a national or a chapter level. So it was with great intention that individuals were kind of, for lack of better words, drafted or nominated through a leadership process because of their conduct on a local or regional or national level, because those skills were needed to align with the strategic plan that was decided for the association. So then a slate is presented to be voted on to fulfill some of those skills that are missing. And then that's how priorities are usually set as to which strategies you're going to move forward to, because the slate's usually not quite big enough for all the things that are needed in order to move forward. That is very typical inside of an association. So there you go. And I didn't read the question before I said there is a question that came in. Otherwise, I would have set that up differently. Okay, we are at 12:15 on the West Coast. Any other thoughts or comments, just openly or generally, for Cole, specific to advocacy, national board service? Anybody want to bitch about anything? Welcome to Fuck Shit Up.
Thanks for being here. I really like that this committee exists. I feel like I was already too high up in the organization to really ever be a real part of it. But I've been in the room a lot of times and it's fun. I'm glad it's here. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm going to bequeath everybody 45 minutes of their lives back, and we'll see you again. Let me look up the next date just so that it's on the recording. We have one more set up already, but we don't actually have a topic yet. So Cole, if you want to tell the national board or any of the other committees or anybody on the call, any of your committees, the next call is May 20th, Tuesday, 11 to 1 Pacific time. That is also during the bar summit, which I, to my knowledge, am not going to. So we might end up canceling it, or you could do some fuck shit up thing at the bar summit. I don't know. I'm not in charge. But whatever people need, that is technically the next one that's scheduled. But otherwise, thank you, Advocacy Committee. Truly, thank you for, I feel kind of privileged that I've been involved enough that it was like a percolated idea that has really become something that can happen. And for those that have been on Fuck Shit Up for a while, advocacy was one of the first priorities when hiring a new executive director. I think the search committee really kept the idea of advocacy alive, which led to hiring of Bo, which I think is a really great match for that being such a strong priority. So thank you for doing all your work.
I'm really glad that we are where we are. Sometimes this organization, like any administrative body, it feels like nothing happens for a long time, and then when something actually happens, it feels kind of momentous, even though those individual changes are often very incremental. So the fact that a lot of the things that I've been trying to push for the 5 years I've been on the board of a 6-year term, or 2 3-year terms, the fact that these things are finally happening 5 years in speaks to both like the strengths and challenges of this kind of organization.
Excellent. All right. Well, everybody, see you in May, or likely not, because it might get canceled because of Bar Summit. Y'all have a
Come
great
to Bar
time.
Summit, though. Everyone come to Bar Summit. You can just register. It's fine.
Yeah, sounds great. If you need
All right.
anything, let me know. I'm always here. And thank you again. Alina, you unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Saying goodbye.
Oh, great.
Oh,
Thanks.
bye. Come to Bar Summit. I miss you.
Hey, I can't afford it this year. I'm doing all the other big things, so I can't take off that much work.
All right. Well, holla at me during Tails then.
I will see you at Tails for sure. Let's
All
talk
right.
about
Mwah.
something at your bar.
Sounds good.
Bye,
All right.
y'all.
A biento.
Great job, Cole.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye. Great questions.